I remember telling that horse, "Oh my God, I want to be here too. I don't want to go back to my physical life anymore." And he was like, "No, you have so much good to do with animals and so much to give to the humanity as well." Even though I was resisting this gift a little bit, I just started receiving answers and just internally knowing what the underlying issue might be. I was actually able to give big epiphanies to the humans, to the owners of the animals, and to improve their quality of life and the harmony with their animals.
Hello and welcome to the Wordful Woman podcast. I'm Christina, your host, and my guests are people who operate at the intersection of science and spirituality. It is my great pleasure today to speak with Mira Helena Nieminen. Welcome to the show, Mira.
Hi, great to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you. Dear listeners, Mira Helena Nieminen is an animal consciousness interpreter and a veterinary physiotherapist holding a Master of Science in Veterinary Physiotherapy from the University of Liverpool. For listeners unfamiliar with animal communication, it refers to intuitive interspecies communication. A real-life Dr. Dolittle, Mira is able to intuitively understand the energy that our animal friends are reflecting back to us. Founder of the Animal Consciousness Coaching Method, Mira radiates kindness and compassion towards all creatures, great and small. Her immense love for animals is evident in her work, and I'm excited for her to share her extensive knowledge of our non-human friends with us today. With that being said, Mira, you have a deep understanding of animals from both a scientific and a spiritual perspective. Can you share about how this came to be? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to discover your ability to connect with animals.
Yeah, great to share my experience. So you mentioned that I'm able to understand the energy that our animal friends are reflecting back to us. So let's start by defining what energy actually is. So from a purely scientific viewpoint, it is the ability to do work, and energy can be potential, kinetic, thermal, electrical, etc. And from a spiritual point of view, it's a non-physical force that flows through us and the whole universe. So even these two definitions are not contradictory. Energy is movement. It moves something from A to B, or it turns a liquid into gas or a solid into liquid. So in the same way that spiritual energy is seen as force behind everything, flowing through all that is, it is a causative non-physical force, and the forms it may exist in, that I listed, are its manifestations, ways to store energy. So that only as a clarification. And how I ended up doing what I'm doing currently, um, i.e., interpreting our animal friends' energy. Mm, Around 2015, I guess, I was training as a equine shiatsu practitioner, where I got to know a colleague of mine in the similar course, and she offered to do a Reiki session with me. So during that session, I remember when she placed her hands around my head, something very powerful started happening. Like I was already relaxed, but at that point, I entered a trance-like state of being, like a really, really deep meditative state where I was barely feeling if I was sitting on the chair anymore or laying on the ground. I could barely tell my head from my toe, and like very, yeah, trance-like, I think would be the best word indeed. And I entered a dark space that I kind of saw in front of me. I had my eyes closed, so obviously it was dark, but I was like in a dark room. I was really feeling the room around me. And I saw a horse that I actually had encountered in this physical life previously that passed away a couple of years ago. And we always had a very, very special connection with that particular animal. And I was in an interesting place in my life those time, a little bit of burnout. I was slightly underweight, highly overachieving in a very negative way. And that feeling of relief that I felt when I saw that horse, when I was in that trance-like state, I remember telling that horse, oh my God, I want to be here too. I don't want to go back to my physical life anymore. And he was like, no, you have so much good to do with animals and so much to give to the humanity as well, that trust me, you're gonna experience the same feeling in your physical life. And I remember I started crying so much out of pure unconditional love that when I quote woke up from that state, yeah, I was just crying like crazy. And my colleague told me, wow, there was something really going on when she did that. So yeah, that's really something that turned the things around from for me. I realized the weirdness of my overachieving, over performance, and all that. And I started noticing that even though I was resisting this gift a little bit, when I was interacting with humans and animals, or humans with animals, and they had some problem with them, I just started receiving answers and just internally knowing what the underlying issue might be. And at some point, I, I carefully started vocalizing them actually out, and I noticed I was actually able to give big epiphanies to the humans, to the owners of the animals, and to improve their quality of life and the harmony with their animals. So, yeah, I did put some resistance on my path myself quite a bit in the beginning, like imposter syndrome and all that, as I think almost everybody knows that is going a spiritual path. But yeah, I do feel it's my biggest calling. It is something that is my way of helping people and animals the best way I can.
That's such a beautiful story, and it sounds like such a profoundly transformative experiences that, and these are typically not easy to put into words. So, thank you for attempting to put that into words for us. So you get these intuitive insights from animals, and I know you also define your gift as that of clear cognizance. Can you describe to us what it means and how it feels like? Again, I know it's difficult to put into words, but just to give us an idea how it feels like to just know things.
Yeah, so at a later point of this podcast, we're going to dig more deeply into what claircognizance actually might be from the scientific perspective. But how I see it, it is channeling the current energy, the current emotion of an object, or an animal, or a human, of any being, verbalizing it and shedding, or giving some clarity to them on that, to help them understand themselves. I'm not a psychic, or I don't like to name myself as such, because I'm seeing or what I see as a problem in naming oneself as a psychic is that there are always hundreds, if not millions, of possible different manifestations or outcomes of the current energy. So you just pick up most likely the one that is vibrating the most, or most powerfully at the moment, which is the most likely to manifest indeed, but it doesn't have to be that. And if it's an outcome that you don't want to manifest or play out in such an obvious way in the reality, you can always change what you're creating or what you're manifesting. So that's why if you go to a psychic with a bad mood, they're going to tell you, oh, you're gonna live horrible things, and then you start believing it in it even more and start creating exactly that. If you go to a psychic having a great mood, they are gonna tell you you're gonna win the lottery or whatever, and then you start believing that, and it might actually happen. So yeah, I am shedding light into one's emotions and the current situation, but I'm not ever going to say that this is what's going to manifest and this is what you're going to live in your future, because it can change in 5 seconds if you don't like what I said. So yeah, that's how I utilize this. Yeah, gifts. It is something that anybody could do to an extent. One is able to quiet their minds. Yeah, it is channeling of energy and of superpositions that we're going to define later as well.
So we're gonna go into that from a scientific, from a potential scientific view in just a second, because I'm sure our listeners are like, "Ooh, I do want to hear that side of things as well." But just to recap, on how you were describing your gift. So so what I hear is you are channeling, you're tuning into the energy that is present in the way that you defined it at the very beginning. You interpret it, and based on that interpretation, you see what is likely to occur, but that can still be changed. So it's not so we don't live in this like deterministic type of world. We can still change things, and yeah.
Yeah, so I think to wrap it up, it is my absolute mission. It is the greatest mission behind my work, to lead people and animals as well. But animals are actually pretty good at it, but mostly humans, back to their own power and realizing how much influence their own management of their own vibration slash emotions actually has, how much impact it has on their reality. So that is my mission. I'm never the one that comes to tell you what you should do or who you are or what's going to happen. I'm the one that leads you to your own power.
I was about to say that sounds very empowering, and very optimistic, and I love your mission, and in keeping with our promise to attempt explaining your abilities from a scientific perspective. I know that as part of your professional journey, you sought to link your intuitive understanding about animal and human consciousness to two theories. So one of them is a famous theory of consciousness called the orchestrated objective reduction theory, also known as the OR theory. Here, I'm going to give our listeners some context. So Mira's going to tell you more about the theory, but just to set the ground to understand what we're going to talk about, because it's quite complex. So this theory is advanced by the Nobel laureate in physics, Sir Roger Penrose, and by anesthesiologist, Dr. Stuart Hameroff. And basically, it proposes that consciousness originates from quantum computations that occur in microtubules, so the structures inside brain neurons. Mira and I felt that it was important to clarify, she's not a quantum physicist, I'm not a quantum physicist, but that, you know, her knowledge of this theory and how it might help explain animal and human consciousness comes from reading the relevant academic literature, and it was driven by her desire to explain her intuitive abilities through a scientific lens, which I really commend. I think it's such a great attempt, you know, at linking science and spirituality, which we're all about here. And the second theory that Mira explored is Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance. So this is a proposed process through which self-organizing systems could inherit a memory from previous similar systems. So this would transcend space and time. And for listeners unfamiliar with Dr. Sheldrake, he's a biologist and author of more than 90 scientific papers and 9 books, co-author of 6 books, and alumnus of Cambridge and Harvard universities. Okay, so after all that extensive explanation, I'm gonna let Mira follow up with an even more extensive one. So Mira, could you take it from here and share more about the morphic resonance theory, OR, and how you think they might link to your ability to communicate with animals?
Yeah, so I think the logical order is to start out with the morphic resonance theory of Rupert Sheldrake. So the starting point is to opening oneself to the idea that consciousness might not be located only inside the brain. So the morphic resonance theory, I think in the most plain terms, could be explained as causative information transcending space and time through morphic fields that are force fields formed and organized by the transmission of this information from one conscious system or consciousness to a subsequent similar structures of conscious activity / the receiver, a being that possesses a consciousness. So to speak, we are talking about collective memory, nonverbal inheritance of a memory by similar systems. So we are not giving information verbally to someone, but they are, let's say, channeling or picking it up from the morphic fields, from the non-physical energy fields. And that way, the memory or the information is transmitted to similar beings. So one awesome example of, or potential example of the morphic resonance theory is how the ancient Egyptians had the god of death, Anubis, and at the same time the Aztecs had a god called Xolotl that actually looks exactly like Anubis, a black dog-headed man, which also was a god of death. Not to mention the resemblance of the Egyptian pyramids and the Aztec temples, which I think is mind-blowing, how all that happened pretty much at the same time in total different continents even. I think here the question is what makes consecutive systems similar enough to be able to inherit the memory? Is it just the same species? Like, can a dolphin inherit from a whale or the other way around? Can any organism possessing a consciousness, which means any organism with a cytoskeletal network, inherit the memory? So yeah, does the morphic resonance cover this enough? I have not read all of his books, not read all of his papers, so it might as well be that there is an explanation to this. I have just personally never come across with that.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome that you are sharing from this midpoint, while you're still on the journey of figuring it out. Because I think we need more of that transparency and saying, look, this is where I'm at, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. And I have this hypothesis about how things might work. It might be true, it might not be, but we're giving it a shot, and we're seeing what's supported by data and what's not eventually.
What I am thinking at the moment, it might be that if the information is relevant to the subsequent receiver of the information, there might be the energy of attention that makes the non-physical picking up of the information possible. So that's where the ORC-OR steps into the picture. So I think the ORC-OR explains more how that non-physical information is actually picked up and utilized by the subsequent receiver of the memory or the information, and how it can transcend interspecies boundaries potentially. So yeah, as Christina said, the information about our environment is processed by quantum computations in microtubules inside our brain neurons. So by the virtue of this information, superpositions of an outcome are processed in the microtubules, and superpositions are virtual mini realities that have not manifested yet, but they possess the possibility of becoming the reality for the observer or the receiver of the information from the environment. These superpositions are formed inside the brain neurons. And yeah, so there's actually a fancy mathematical formula at which point the other superpositions collapse and the most likely reality is picked up by the one that is perceiving the reality. So as an example of this very complicated theory is the tree falling in a forest example. Like if a tree falls down in a forest and there's nobody to hear it, is there actually sound coming from it. And according to this theory, the answer is no, because the vibration that comes from the process of tree falling down needs an ear to translate that vibration into sound. That is a very clear example of this theory. So that's also how we create our reality too. And when we don't do it deliberately, we basically create more of the same because we are so used to observing things the way we are observing them. So that also scratches the surface of manifestation. So I think one who picks the energy up needs to be vibrating at the same level as the consciousness matrix the information is picked up from, because microtubules where the processes are taking place in are dynamic and vibrate at different frequencies. And the ability to inherit the memory, i.e. embody telepathic or telepathic-like abilities, might well be due to a frequency the microtubules are vibrating at or the way they are tuned. But again, this is merely a postulation. So this is my scientific idea based on my current knowledge on all this.
Yeah, like I commend you for for explaining that on the show. Like for our listeners, both theories are very difficult to do justice in a podcast episode, much less in a question or two. And so we're gonna put resources to both theories in the show description. And of course you are at liberty to agree or disagree with what we put forward, but if the series came on your radar and you're like, oh, that's actually, that's interesting, I want to learn more about that, maybe develop my own ideas as well, like you're more than welcome to. And we definitely welcome that. So Mira, first of all, my head spins. Like, I was preparing for this episode, and I was looking through both theories, and OR in particular, it's very, very difficult to grasp, especially if you don't have the required background, and it does bring in quite a lot of things. And because I don't have the technical expertise to actually assess the theories, like what I would like to share from my side is the human side of things, and how I kind of reacted to that. Because I thought, oh, this is, first of all, I tried to find someone attempting to link the two. As of yet, I haven't found anyone. There might be someone, but you're the first person that I hear attempting to link the two theories, that of morphic resonance and or COR. What I found interesting was that tangentially, in reading about both theories, both had been associated, I'm not sure if by the original authors or by the people going through them, with the idea of collective unconscious of Carl Gustav Jung's. And I thought that was quite interesting, in terms of a scientific backing to what might be a collective unconscious and how that might work. So let me see if I follow how these two, how you believe these two theories connect to explain your ability. So you believe, so we start with the morphic fields, and you postulate that basically the theory says if two self-organizing systems are similar enough, they can pass information between them across space and time. And you say, well, maybe it's not just human to human, maybe human to animal can be similar enough to actually have that information be passed on from one system to another. So then do you follow up with OR as a mechanism through which info from the morphic field is picked up? Like, what is the connection there?
Yeah, exactly how you said it. Like the morphic resonance explains how similar systems can pick up information from the morphic fields, and OR potentially explains how it can transcend interspecies boundaries as well, because of the dynamic nature of the microtubules and the attention and the deliberateness of the perceiver of the reality, as to you can choose what you tune into by quieting your conscious cognitive mind a little bit. You can be influenced by other morphic fields as well as only the ones of your similar species, potentially.
I think to me that sounds like, yeah, by disquieting, you are picking up the info that's there, that's potentially accessible to everyone, but you're more fine-tuned to it, or you have more openness to it. Um, Somehow. I think that that's still the unknown, right? And how you formulated this. And yeah, like what you say, it's also, it reminds me of, so again, the Orco theory is incredibly complex, and I don't claim to do it justice. I am doing my best, however, but I know that one implication of it is that our experience of consciousness, our day-to-day experience of consciousness, is actually generated through this Orco system by bringing together more individual, like proto-conscious qualia, of experience. And I almost like, musical notes creating music. So in this sense, reality is more like, well, consciousness actually is more like like you watch a movie, but you don't see the individual frames. And in reading about this theory, I found it interesting that there are meditation practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, who did notice actually each moment is kind of like, that's not the word they used, frame, but kind of like this singular moment. It comes and goes. It's actually, quite simple, and it just like, they follow on one after the other, or like, more like an orchestra, I guess, according to this theory. But I found it interesting. I don't know, I am reminded of that because you talk about how you're more fine-tuned to this information that's already there, so like if reality is like these frame, we don't see these frames, but maybe what you perceive is akin to these frames. It is reality, it is what's out there, it's just we don't see the finer points of it. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Like you really made good sense out of it, because it is the textures, it is the smells, the lights, all that, how they orchestrate together, how we create the perception of the whole reality. It is not just one smell, one texture, one something that don't fit together. Like my table is solid and cold. It's not solid and warm or soft and like, you get what I'm saying. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for this conversation. Like, I love how we're building on top of these ideas. And I think also for our listeners, it would be important to understand where this Orco theory is placed, because on this podcast, we had quite a few guests who come from the assumption that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality that's independent of the brain. And that's one of the three main schools of thought on what consciousness is. So like the dominant one at the moment in scientific thinking is the materialist one. So, consciousness is like this phenomenon generated by the brain. It dies with the brain. It confers it confers evolutionary advantages, basically. That's how it came to be, from this increasing complexity of nervous systems. And the second one is the one that I just mentioned. Consciousness is this transcendent thing, independent from the brain. It always was there. And in at least one conceptualization, the brain is more like an antenna picking it up. Orco is kind of, I found it interesting because it's kind of neither, basically. It says that there's like these very basic units of consciousness, like proto-consciousness, qualia. They, if my understanding is correct, they kind of occur anyway due to physical processes.
Mm-hmm.
But then in microtubules, basically what happens is that these proto moments, like basically the physical processes happen at the quantum level. This proto consciousness qualia like occurs, like the frame, and then these, like the musical note, and then these are orchestrated into an experience of consciousness. And that's kind of neither the first one nor the second theory. It's kind of like its own third thing. Do you have like, what does this resonate with you, or do you feel like you kind of, which side of the argument do you feel you stand and based on your experiences?
Based on my experiences, it is interesting because, for example, the sun, and this is directly an example from Robert Sheldrake, it's a self-organizing system that acts, yeah, more or less logically. Let's say it manages itself, its temperature, its behavior, but it's still, I think we all agree that she doesn't own a brain per se, yet still we could argue whether it's conscious or not. So I think, yeah, I think consciousness exists more or less in the morphic fields and behind the universe, as I defined the spiritual energy in the beginning. I think it exists in the form of that energy, potentially, but the ability to utilize it um, deliberately requires a cytoskeleton to
Mhm.
use those quantum computations in the microtubules. But whether, yeah, whether the ability to deliberately use or utilize consciousness makes consciousness existent or non-existent if it's not utilized by a perceiver, it's complicated. It's complicated. I don't
It,
know.
It is incredibly complicated, and I wish I heard more I don't knows, because there are still many things we do not know yet, and I know I'm kind of pushing the boundaries of this conversation, but I think it's really interesting to bring up, and I think for the listeners as well to see, like, let's have more of these conversations, and yes, let's ground them in science, and let's make sure we understand the theories, and if we do notice inconsistencies, let's let's get on them. But yeah, I thank you so much, Mira. Like, I know this, I'm very appreciative of you having come up with this potential explanation. Well, first of all, looking into scientific explanations for your ability, like mapping it potentially to these theories that attempt to explain consciousness, or how self-organizing systems pass information from one another. And I think something that I would like also to talk with you about now is kind of the human resistance to bringing spirituality and scientific concepts, because I noticed, for example, you use the concept of raising one's vibration, and this is a popular phrase in New Age belief. Everyone knows this phrase. But I feel like, when you say to someone who might be more skeptical, of the spiritual side of things, they kind of like close down at any attempts to maybe link it to a scientific explanation, if it is indeed a true concept. Like, so would you relate the idea of raising one's vibration, like you said, to the idea of the microtubules vibrating, or do you feel there's something else there you want to map it to at this point?
Yeah, scientifically, I would relate it to the vibration or the frequency of the microtubules. Spiritually, I would relate it to the ability of quieting one's cognitive mind, just mind, and being able to receive. Because, and now I'm linking this back to the theory of morphic resonance a little bit. When we have a question, when we have something that is relevant to us, we create new skills, new abilities, or new information to answer that newborn need in us. That's how evolution basically happens.
Hmm.
And the faster you are able to non-physically receive that information has to do with the level of your vibration. But again, I'm just putting together scientific and spiritual ideas of how this happens.
Yeah, and I think I'm always an advocate of taking concepts from spiritual knowledge and traditions and testing them scientifically, and actually see if
Mm.
the predictions hold and all of that. So I'm not an advocate of, oh, I heard this word and it sounds that derogatory word, like woo woo, so like, we don't touch this. No, we do, and we look at it and we see if it's a reality or not. In line with this, I wanted to also ask you, like, do you feel, because you are on both sides of understanding. You have your direct experiential understanding, your intuitive understanding of animals, which you have direct access to, and you have the scientific understanding, which is it's indirect access to how this ability might work. But you understand both sides. Are there ever contradictions between them? Like, do you experience something that you feel science doesn't hold, or vice versa?
In the beginning, there was even more. Because I did follow a lot of animal communicators that had been doing this for a longer period of time, and some concepts were radical and radically presented as truths, and with little let's say, justifications of what is truly happening, and perhaps even people claiming themselves as psychics that basically tell, as I presented in the beginning, what is going to happen and how things are, period. No need for further explanations. So that's where I kind of felt the resonance to follow the classical animal communicator path / the fully spiritual path, but my science side was not happy with that. So that's where the conflict was the biggest. So when I started exploring more, and I came across with the concept of superpositions and ability to channel multiple possible outcomes by the virtue of what is currently happening in the energy, I kind of understood what was going on and why my scientific side was not fully agreed with some of the spiritual practitioners. So now, yeah, even though there is still limited acknowledgement and a lot of critical discussion to the theories of morphic resonance and ORC-OR, there is, up to my knowledge, no theory that would, on the other hand, override or invalidate those theories. So those two theories highly support my current intuitive understanding of the situation, of what is going on, and the accuracy that has obviously been happening between or in my readings between me and my clients. Yeah, so there's nothing that would contradict it. So that's how the reconciliation more or less works at the moment. But on the other hand, no, there is no sufficient evidence to say it is like this. But this is also something that I do claim on my website, and I make the disclaimer, so to speak, that this is not an evidence-based thing to start with.
And again, I mean, I commend you on your integrity, and I think your scientific spirit, comes through in how you speak, and how you approach understanding your abilities and how you approach debating these topics. So I think that's wonderful. And I think our listeners are also curious to hear some stories. So I want to take it a little bit to the practicals. Can you give us an example of when you read for animals? Like, how does it actually look like? Let's say if someone comes to you with their pet, like, can you give us an example from your experience?
I think the most powerful one was a client who shared a trauma with dogs that he's been having. I don't want to go into too much details of the problem for the privacy of my client, but yeah, there was a trauma going on, and this one was a very spontaneous one. I didn't do any particular preparations or anything. He came with oh, you do this, I have this question, so what do you think? And I was like, oh, this comes fast. And in the same moment, the answer was more or less there. I started interpreting what I was, this is the point that I cannot justify getting from somewhere. So I think energetically, I feel that this is happening. In my head, I saw him in an interaction with dogs, and I could see and feel how his own vibration and energy was interacting with the animals in that moment, and how it influenced those animals, and how those animals saw that vibration and understood that, because animals don't understand verbal communication, they understand vibration. That's how they communicate, and that's how they work. So I asked if this could be something that resonates with him, and he was mind blown. He was, oh yeah, I mean, that's exactly what has been going on with me. And it was not only this situation, what always is the case. It is something that you carry with you and you take with yourself, even like regardless if there is interaction with other beings or not, you take yourself with you. So it really touched him in a deeper level. It was something that he had been carrying with him since early years, and we even came to the question what he actually really wants to do in his life. And he ended up writing also some scientific text about this, and it was a very, very nurturing discussion on both ends. So that's one example that was particularly successful because we ended up resolving some very, very long-term issues and deeper questions with him.
Thank you for sharing this. And this brings me to my next question. Why are animals here? Like, we in spirituality, we often assume a greater purpose to human lives. Like, do animals also have a greater purpose to their lives?
Um, yeah, funnily enough, I've been talking about the concept of purpose with a good friend of mine lately a lot. My current understanding is that through the evolution and expansion of consciousness and the universe, there for sure is some degree of intending to experience certain things while in a physical body before we incarnate, like intentions that we said before incarnation that we might call as purpose or destiny or whatever. But the juicy part is that the conscious evolution doesn't end after incarnation. So, in other words, you continue to expand while in your physical body and redefine things you'd like to discover and experience and learn from. So, you get to redefine your purpose every day all over again. So, the same applies generally to animals, although they are less active, let's say, and less powerful in desiring for new manifestations because they are way more unconditional than we humans are. So basically, if we want to present this in a yin yang kind of way, we humans represent the power of asking for something better all the time, more or less. We're always complaining. We always want something more. We all know that. Yeah. So we are powerfully asking all the time, and we're actually summoning a lot of energy and a lot of potential for evolution because we're asking so much all the time. But we have not necessarily yet quite claimed the mastership of the allowing and receiving part of a peaceful, unconditional life. Some people certainly have, but I dare to claim that like 99% of the people that are on our planet could do a bit better on it. To be very trying to be friendly here. Yeah. So this is a global phenomenon. Yeah. So the purpose of each species having incarnated the way they have certainly serves a great balance. Animals teach us their individual as well as species specific wisdoms, but also as animal kingdom, they teach us unconditionally and allowing. They are masters in being happy anyway. Like, look at your cat chilling on the couch. He won't care. They're just happy. Like, they don't need something better all the time. Like, okay, maybe cats sometimes do if the feed is not the one of actual preference, but you get what I'm saying. It's the phenomena. Yeah, so they teach us unconditionality. Dogs, for example, are the servants that reflect your vibrational discord through anything and everything for you to learn from. Whereas cats are a species that simply decide to leave to higher vibing places if they don't like something. For example, like if there is continuous discord at somebody's home, they might actually just go somewhere else. But dogs, for example, they like picking up or like, but they tend to pick up diseases, problems, whatever, because they are the servants. They just really show what is going on and they don't really leave all that um, easily, even though it might sometimes even be there or could be for their highest good. So, yeah, both very important teachers to learn about your own vibration and setting healthy boundaries as well.
I hear the part about cats leaving to higher vibing places and setting boundaries. I think all listeners who are also following me on Instagram, like they know from my stories, I'm like a tad obsessed with cats, especially with mine. I have very appropriate background for today as well. You can see the cats in the background. Which also makes me wonder, in your experience, like, are some animals easier to communicate with than others?
Mm, yeah, I'm coming back to the point of the relevancy of the interaction and the information as I shared briefly when I outlined the theory of OR and the ability of picking up the information from the morphic fields. So animals who have chosen to co-create with humans have the attention to us and interesting in interacting with us already. So that's why I believe it's generally easier to connect with the wisdom and teachings of animal friends in the households of humans. However, just like our ancestors understood already, there is magnificent wisdom about ourselves, our roots, and our higher capabilities held by wild animals and nature. So I truly believe it is possible to connect with and understand these less domesticated organisms as well, to learn and to read them and to work in harmony with them, and through that understand how they are guiding one on their path. One example of this is the idea of spirit animals, totem animals, and power animals that our ancestors have used in asking for guidance on their path, for example. So, question wrap up. Yes, generally speaking, the wisdom of domesticated animals might be more accessible due to their focus and genuine interest in us. Wild animals might require a bit more unconditioning. And lastly, some species might be easier to channel to some than to others based on their, let's name them totem animals and or current power or spirit animals, which are different concepts per se. So, for example, you have you might have always felt that you have a special connection with a certain species that might as well be your something that our ancestors would have named your totem animal. So it might be you are able to channel that species more easily than some other species.
So there's spirit animals, totem animals, and the third one was
The third one is power animal.
and power animals. So what are the core differences?
Yeah, so this is not my theory, but it is an ancestral inherited idea. So totem animal basically represents your vibrational and soul blueprint. It is something that accompanies you in the level of spirit for your whole life, which is an individual totem animal. A group totem animal is something that you have in common with your tribe or with your family, your bloodline, whatever, but serves the same purpose, something that represents the soul blueprint and never leaves, it's permanent. Power animal is something that you summon in certain crossroads of life. For example, you feel that the energy of this animal would really help me right now, such as, for example, rabbit, make rabbit decisions, take turns fastly to make fast decisions in life. So you kind of consciously summon their energy, so you decide on them. Spirit animal is an animal guide that appears to you just like a totem animal does, but it accompanies you just for a predefined period of life to guide you forwards in your life. It kind of represents what you actually need in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just ways that our ancestors have certain tribes have operated in life. I don't fully understand everything necessarily, but it is something that why not utilize every now and then? At least it's great fun.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder how it would work. And in wondering that, it reminds me, like perhaps it could be tied to the Orco theory. So for context, this theory has been in development for 30 years, and it has been changed, a long time based on the data that was collected, what was supported, what was not supported. And Sir Roger Penrose, who developed the theory with Dr. Stuart Hameroff, at least at one point, I'm not sure if he still stands by that, though he might, basically was postulating that the quantum processes in the microtubules, like the outcome is partially influenced by information, well, by the information coming from like this very base level of reality, but he was equating it, at least at the time, with this platonic level of reality, like, you know, pure ideas, pure mathematics, ethics, aesthetics, you know, morality. And I thought it was interesting when you talk, for example, about spirit animals, because you might say, well, how can I tune into the idea of an animal? But perhaps, you know, if there is such a world of ideas, like of information that we can tune into via potentially this process, then that would make more sense, I would say. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, that sounds good. And definitely the idea of spirit animals does resonate the most with me, indeed. And I do think about my experience with a one individual horse, but I'm still postulating if it has more to do with the one individual that just happened to be a horse in this moment. Could it have been a dog also? Like, because the spirit animal more precisely refers to the whole species as your spirit animal. So,
Mm.
but yeah, what you said makes sense.
Yeah, and thank you for explaining these three terms to us, because I've often heard them, but I don't think I've ever actually stopped to see, okay, but what is the actual difference between the three? And something that you mentioned was that you presume that pets might be easier to communicate with. And I think at this point, all our listeners who have pets, myself included, you know, like pricked up their ears, you know, they're like, okay, you know, can I communicate with my pet? Is this something that everyone can do? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is not a gift that is somehow pre-given to you before incarnation. Like I am totally anti past life karma personally. So yes, it is a matter of unconditioning, rediscovering, and unfolding.
Is there something that we can do in practical terms to aid that process?
Meditation, training your intuition, recalling moments where you have had an inner gut feeling about something being right or wrong, and cultivating and nourishing that feeling, because that is how your animal connects with you.
That's awesome. And thank you. And I feel many times I hear the meditation, you know, as an answer to a lot of my spiritual questions, and it's always like, to someone who is relatively restless like me, it's like, ah, meditation. But you know, it is a lesson. It is a lesson.
It is like, could you please say something else than meditation? Because I really don't want to do it. Okay. I know.
Uh, well, I feel slightly off topic perhaps here, but maybe on topic as well. Like for me, I discovered meditation doesn't have to be for me at least sitting down and like, you know, like emptying my mind, you know. Like for me, I meditate when I dance, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally true. And it's perfect that you made that point out because, for example, I have received channelings while doing the dishes or something. I think this concept is actually from the book Hands-on Healing, but I would need to recheck who wrote that. But yeah, book Hands-on Healing. In that one, it was actually explained how in while you're doing these casual activities, just like cleaning, dancing, doing the dishes, whatever, you are actually in a more receptive state because you are not putting yourself under the pressure of receiving something. You're not trying too hard, where you actually have a higher risk of introducing your own thoughts or your desired conditional outcome to the equation. So yeah, it's a great point that you made. I think, yeah, those casual activities or activities that you enjoy where you kind of, yeah, you quiet your mind, like without trying to quiet your mind. So you're totally free of pressure and, yeah, makes you more capable of meditating.
Being in the moment,
Yeah,
like our animal friends are so good
exactly,
at.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. They're masters in that.
So, Mira, there were a couple of points at which you mentioned that certain myths about animals. For example, when you were following animal communicators in the beginning and they were saying things you didn't quite resonate with scientifically. In your view, what are the biggest spiritual myths about animals?
Yeah, so what I encounter a lot is the human need for superiority over other beings and the human need for entitlement and fixing something, especially something that they perceive as minor to them or us. So we humans like to feel as if our animal companions come to our lives full of some sort of past life karma or drama. Yeah, karma, drama, trauma, if they have some problems. And this is the standpoint of many spiritual people. They kind of put excessive fault on their animals. So, yeah, and then they have the human need to fix this. Past lives don't work in a way that is so black and white like that. I outlined this in one of the previous questions already by saying that there's certainly through conscious evolution is something that you have decided you want to experience here on this planet Earth, but you don't remember or carry on the contrasts, the shadows of past lives, according to my current understanding with you, like that. So I do believe that animals also do forget their past lives in a sense that they don't carry it around with them, and that we humans need to fix that in this way. I do think animals actually are way more teachers to us humans in the allowing of more love and unconditionality into our lives, like I said. So I think humans could open themselves up for learning from animals a bit more rather than trying to fix them from a spiritual point of view as well.
Do humans ever come back, as far as reincarnation goes, do humans ever come back as animals or vice versa?
Mm, I think interspecies boundaries crossing reincarnations might not be necessary because when you make your transition, you have access to the information that you would seek from a human perspective if you said that I need to incarnate as an animal in the next life, if you get what I'm saying. So yeah, those kind of reincarnations might indeed be unnecessary, but I'm not sure. It would be great to ask this from somebody who actually remembers or claims to remember or indeed remembers their past lives, a person who might have more understanding on actual past lives or life after death or reincarnations. It would be great. That's something that is absolutely not my specialty. So I have very little to comment on that. It would be interesting to know more about, though.
Yeah, I had to ask. I was so curious. Um, Mira, for anyone curious to learn more about what you shared today, could you recommend some resources for our listeners? You mentioned the title of a book earlier. Anything else?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage to visit Robert Sheldrake's website, which is robertsheldrake.com. And this is for way, way, way more detailed explanation on the morphic resonance theory. I am a big fan of his material. Then I would also love to recommend Abraham Hicks, um, which can easily be found on YouTube. Abraham is a non-physical collective that is channeled by Esther Hicks. And I think they have such an amazing, practical, a bit sassy, and definitely modern way of explaining um, the art of channeling and law of attraction. That for as a purely spiritual resource, I would love to recommend Abraham Hicks on YouTube.
Awesome. I'd like us now to go a little bit well, a little bit further into the future. So if you imagine that it's 50 years from now, soon, what advancements do you hope that we'll make in understanding animals?
I think, or I hope that by that time, we will, on one hand, have acknowledged their own kind of intelligence, the intelligence of animals, in a deep, respectful way. And on the other hand, I hope that we have let go of humanizing their cognitive side of their minds as to my dog is doing this because this and that, and straight out emotions that they don't experience in a cognitive way or process them in the cognitive way we humans do. So that would highly increase the harmony between humans and animals.
That's beautiful. Mira, if you could be remembered for just one thing, what would you like that thing to be?
Yeah, I definitely said that earlier again, but I hope I could be remembered as a person who empowers and encourages the use of one's own power and energy, and that is not asked for black and white answers, because you always have the potential of changing the outcome.
Amen.
Yeah.
I am a fan of that mission. And if our listeners remember just one thing from what you shared today, what should that thing be?
Mm, yeah, animals shouldn't be considered minor in their intelligence just because we humans define intelligence differently than what we are used to, i.e., only in cognitive terms, decision making, logical A to B thinking. And yeah, I would love to make it my key point that animals are teaching us non-physical or non-cognitive infinite intelligence, and letting the life force, the spiritual energy, flowing as well.
That's beautiful. And it makes me think that we still struggle even with other humans to appreciate various types of intelligence. We put certain types of intelligence on a pedestal and look down on
Yeah,
others. So this lesson from animals is also going to help us treating ourselves and other humans better as far as how we conceptualize intelligence, I think. So yet another gift that they bring to us.
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
And Mira, is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you would like to share with us?
That was pretty comprehensive, to say the least. So at this moment, no, I don't think I have anything more to share. We actually even discovered some new points of view between each other in this discussion. So I think that was awesome. Uh, yeah, need some time to digest all this as well.
It was really awesome, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And lastly, where can our listeners find you if they want to see more of your work?
My website is mirahelena.com, .net, actually. Yeah, mirahelena.net. You can stay tuned via that address.
Awesome. Mira, this was such an awesome conversation, and I so appreciated our time and your willingness to not only share about your abilities and in such a beautiful, open, and even vulnerable way, but also attempt to bridge it to current scientific theories and be very clear on the fact that this is a work in progress, and be so brave and daring in presenting these ideas, and even brainstorming live with me on what some of them might mean. So thank you so much for that. And dear listeners, as you've already seen, this was an absolute treat of an episode, and especially if you have pets, I hope you have a lot of ones to take home with you.
Thank you, Christina. It was a great experience. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah, I truly enjoyed it.